Hello everyone, I'm Adrian and welcome to Rabona TV. Now, today, given the struggles that Germany have had in recent years, really, dating back to the 2018 World Cup and recently suffering their heaviest defeat since 1931, I figured an exploration of the team and their issues was due, and AB Picks echoed that sentiment on Twitter. But with many of you asking me to dip my toes into the podcast world, I thought we'd give this a bit of a trial run, so to speak, a cautious first step into it. To help me out, Manuel Veth join me. Manuel's the North American area manager for Transfermarkt, the site we all know and love so much. But he also covers the Bundesliga and German football for various publications and co-hosts the Bundesliga Gegenpressing podcast. All of his links are listed in the description, and another big thank you to Manuel for taking the time. By the way, if you guys like this longer interview-based sort of conversation type video, then let me know in the comments because it's an avenue I'd like to go down. Beyond that, let's jump right into it. So let's start in 2018, because of course the 2018 World Cup was a bit of a disaster following, their victory in 2014. So would you say that was the first tripping block for them, or had there been some cracks that had shown prior to the tournament as well?
I think the cracks started appearing in the build up to that tournament, and it was a bit of an oddity in so many ways, because when you even just go back 1 year to 2017, and I covered both the Germany at the World Cup in 2018, but I was also at the Confederations Cup in Russia in 2017. And it was such an oddity because in 2017, German football seemed in such an incredible place because they won the European Championships, the U21 European Championship, and they flew through that Confed Cup tournament with what is essentially their B team. I think the cracks started to appear when Joachim Low had this abundance of talent available, and all of a sudden he had to fuse them all together, right? He had this very successful U21 side. He had this very successful U21 B side, I guess you can call it, that went for the Confed Cup, right? And then he had the side that also won the Olympic silver medal in 2016. And then he had the 2014 World Cup winning team that was very young to win a World Cup, right, in 2014, and still was very much in its prime. And I think the cracks really started to appear when he tried to put these teams all together and tried to find a playing style that, allows all these players to play together. And there was a little bit of a generational clash. Now, I would say a lot of that is now hindsight, but I think when you now look back, you could see these things happening. I mean, I need to stress this from the very start. I don't think Germany has a talent problem. This is not what's going on here. The problems are much, much deeper than that. When you look at the squad that just got hammered yesterday, and this is why we're doing the show, right? That's not a bad team. That team should not be losing 6-0 to Spain. So I think we really have to go much deeper than that. And I think to understand that, we have to understand what's happened between 2017 and 2018. And the World Cup in 2018 was an absolute disaster, because that team should have probably defended their World Cup with the talent available, and it didn't. And ever since then, the wheels have come off. And I think that's really where we have to go back to, is Löw really trying to fail to integrate all the talent available to him.
And that brings up an interesting thing, because I remember, with all of the success that Hansi Flick has been having at Bayern Munich, and I remember reading into things, how he was such an integral part of this German setup during the 2014 World Cup. He was very good with the man management. He was the guy that the players would go to. He even helped with the set pieces organization and stuff like that. So do you think that there's any correlation between him leaving in 2014 and then a slow sort of decline, for lack of a better word, for Germany?
I mean, it's now obvious, isn't it? Because I think we kind of underestimated the role that Hansi Flick had in Germany winning the World Cup in 2014. And also in the build-up to the tournament and the success that the country had. Because you could always see when Germany did not do well. I mean, there was the Euros in 2012, which is a tournament they should have won with the talent available. When we have the Euros 2016, again, a tournament that they should have won with the talent available. Both those tournaments, either Flick wasn't there or he didn't have much influence. We know that Flick gained a lot more influence in 2014, ahead of the World Cup, but also during the World Cup, working with the players. I mean, the set piece thing is one that is talked about a lot, but I'm pretty sure it's much deeper than that. And I think we see the cutoff. We see 2014 ends, And then, yes, there was that year in 2017 where Germany was very successful. But by and large, the 4 years that followed after, or the 6 years that have followed since Flick has left, have been a lot less successful, even though the talent pool has more or less stayed the same or has even been bigger. And then Flick takes over Bayern last fall, a side that I was at this game. I covered this game in Frankfurt. They were smashed by Eintracht Frankfurt 5-1. And he takes over a team that's completely demoralized, is, rock bottom. No one would have thought that they would win the German championship, let alone a triple. And then in August, they're the best team in the world. That's in the span of 8-9 months. So this is not a small undertaking. And I think that's when a lot of people realized, okay, maybe we always underestimated Hansi Flick's role. So I think there is a huge correlation between Flick leaving and the problems that the national team has faced since. And I think that Joachim Low, one of his biggest issues is that while he is tactically very sound and an innovator in many ways, he also tinkers quite a bit. The man management aspect of his work seems to have really struggled. And I think you see it now. I mean, he tinkers every single time there is any kind of setback. He changes his lineups. I mean, we haven't really had a core group together at all. So I think Flick's role has been massively underappreciated, really until August, when Bayern stormed to the Champions League title.
Yeah, I agree. And what you said about him constantly changing things and tinkering, that often reeks of someone who's being quite reactive and someone who is trying to fix problems as they come up instead of being proactive, which is a shame when you have such a talented pool, as you said, in Germany. And speaking of his man management, let's go back to 2019. March of 2019, I believe, is when he told Hummels and Müller and Boateng that they no longer had a place and that they're sort of starting again with the German national team. And again, this is going to be a bit of revisionist history, of course, but how big of an impact, if any, do you think that the squad is still feeling from the loss of Thomas Muller, especially taking into account how well he's been playing under Flick?
It's an interesting question because I get both sides of the argument. On the one hand, he needed a break and he needed to establish a new hierarchy within the German national team. And that's very hard to do when you have, the old leaders of the pack still around. And make no mistake, Müller, Boateng, and Hummels are leaders of the pack. They're the beacon of the old generation, the 2014 World Cup winning side. But on the other hand, Toni Kroos and Manuel Neuer are still there, right? I think at the time when it happened, I understood his decision because Thomas Muller hadn't been playing well. But then you also see who he was managed at Bayern, right? It was Carlo Ancelotti, who now turns out to be not as great of a manager as many people think. And then Niko Kovac, who we all saw what happened with him at Bayern. And then Hansi Flick comes in, and all of a sudden, Thomas Muller is once again one of the best attacking midfielders or forwards in the world. And I think when you have a player like him available, and he is available, the national teams are always supposed to be the best players from one country. I think he might have to rethink it. Now, how do you do it after you've basically said, okay, we're going to rebuild our hierarchy. We want to give these young players a chance. And you have continuously said that that's our focus going forward. It's difficult. It's very difficult to say, okay, well, now we're bringing these players in because you guys can't get it done. But on the other hand, you have Manuel Neuer yesterday saying in a Sportbild interview that if it was up to him, Boateng, Hummels, and Müller would be back in the side. So, it's going to be a political issue going into Euro 2020. I personally think he has to bring him back. When we listen to the game, we can now listen to games, right? That's one of the big things. We can actually listen what happens on the field now because of the empty stadiums. And that side was quiet. There was no leadership on that field. There was no one giving directions. I mean, it felt so bad for Manuel Neuer on a day that he broke Sepp Maier's record. He suffered the biggest defeat in a competitive fixture for Germany. That shouldn't be happening. He was the only player that sort of stemmed against the tide. And that shows me that, yeah, maybe Germany would have still lost, but I doubt that they would have lost 6-0 if you had the players like Boateng or Hummels or Thomas Muller on that field, because they would have provided a sort of leadership that was absolutely lacking in this 11.
That's another thing that comes up a lot, is that it seems like there's no natural leaders on the pitch. Of course, Manuel Neuer is a natural leader, but it's a funny thing for me. For some reason, it's not that I discount keepers being captains, but it does seem like you need someone that's on the pitch in the midfield that's able to sort of boss everyone around, to grab them by the scruff of the neck and get them amped up and show a little bit of fight, which is something they lacked against Spain.
Yeah, they absolutely did. I mean, maybe Joshua Kimmich would have made a difference. We don't know, right? Kimmich is definitely a leader, and he is going to be the face of that German national team going forward, without a doubt. I personally think he's the best central midfielder in the world right now. But he's injured. He's out, right? And then the leadership, the amount of leaders in that team seems to be a lot thinner than we thought. And I mean, you have someone like Toni Kroos, World Cup winner. He's a very successful player, but he's a silent leader. He's not Bastian Schweinsteiger or Philipp Lahm. I mean, we don't, or Michael Ballack before that. You don't hear him on the field. And that is a problem, in my opinion. You need to have players that can provide a bit of a leadership role. But it's not just that. I mean, one of the things that I've noticed in this game in particular, and the communication is a big part of that. But I drew, and I wrote this in my Forbes article yesterday, right? The big parallel that I drew, I was so reminded of when I was at that game in Frankfurt, Niko Kovac's last game in charge of Bayern Munich, because again, the talent on the field was good enough, but there was no opposition to what Spain did. And this isn't exactly the best Spanish side right now either. And they lost Ramos to an injury in the first half. Luis Enrique in the press conference after the game was amazed by the result, because he said this is essentially Germany's best side minus maybe one or two players. And he couldn't believe how easy it was. And that's what happened in Frankfurt as well. There was no opposition. And it felt like the players were playing against the coach or against the very fact that they had to play this game. And that is something that maybe would worry me the most if I was in charge of the DFB at the moment, is the fact that these players, not that they not just showed no fight, but their inability to stem against the tide and to have any kind of response to what Spain was throwing at them. And that reminds, this is always the death knell for me, for any coach, is when he doesn't reach the players on the field anymore. And I got that sense that Joachim Low is no longer reaching the players on the field. And whenever the camera kind of showed his face, there was this real sense of resignation. And he will never step down. And Oliver Bierhoff, his sporting director, will never fire him. But I think he's no longer reaching this group. And I think he hasn't reached this group in a long time. And that game, more than any other game, showed that.
It does definitely seem like, from what I've read at least, that Germany is going to stand by him at least until after this upcoming Euros. And with that question in mind, do you see it more likely that Löw would step down or be sacked by the DFB, or before we'll see Muller and Hummels or Boateng back in the team again?
I know the pressure is mounting. There's a lot of journalists that feel the same way than I do. And I mean, we're talking about all the big outlets, right? Bild, Kicker. Myself, I'm at Transfermarkt. I know our German editorial staff at Transfermarkt has been very critical. There's a lot of journalists out there that are very critical. I think the foreign press is kind of latching on it. There was a really devastating article written by The Guardian, for example, right? I think the cracks are obvious. They're very, very obvious. Will Joachim Low jump over his own shadow and bring back Boateng, Müller, and Hummels? He's not known for going back on his decisions. He's not known for giving in to pressure from outside. It's actually, we know that it's very difficult to work with him, for example, right? And I mean, the fact that it took Flick until the World Cup 2014 to actually get his voice heard is a great example. The fact that Flick left is actually a good example, right? And so we know he's not an easy person. And we know that he would rather probably leave than jumping over his own shadow and bring back Boateng, Hummels, and Müller, even though maybe deep down he knows he should. I think his big problem is that he knows that maybe he's made a mistake. But on the day when he made the decision, it seemed like a logical decision in many ways to get rid of these 3 players because they weren't playing very good football. But now all of a sudden, things changed, right? So I can't personally see him jump over his own shadow and say, okay, you are back in the squad. But I personally think he should, because it could actually protect his, legacy. He's a World Cup winning coach. There aren't many around that can say that, right? And he's really kind of destroying his legacy at the moment, because Germany's World Cup performance in 2018 was already a historic low. It was the worst performance of any Germany side at a World Cup. This defeat against Spain was another historic low. The last time Germany's lost 6-0 was in 1931 to Austria. So he either has to do something to protect his legacy, and he can't really afford a bad performance at the Euros. And I think for him to kind of protect the performance at the Euros, he might have to make decisions that are popular with everyone else, but unpopular with himself.
It's a bit of a weird one. Because I was looking into the results for Germany over the last couple of years. And of course, you smashed qualifying for Euro 2020. But then now people have their own opinions on the Nations League. But one thing that it does ensure is that you're going to be matched up with an opposition that is at least closer to your level. Yeah. And it says a lot that Germany has struggled so much in the Nations League when they've been matched up against tougher teams. Because, of course, as I said, they did so well in qualifying. So a lot of people are saying that one of Germany's biggest issues is their defense. Do you buy into that? Or do you think that there's issues all over the pitch?
I don't actually think that the talent is an issue at all. Even yesterday's side had 4 Champions League winning players in it. So I'm sorry, but as I pointed out in the article I wrote, there was only 2 players in that side that do not play regularly in the Champions League. And defense, I do think that the defense as an art form has kind of gone out of the window. The game has changed so much. It has gotten so much faster that teams get overruled a lot more these days than it used to be the case. And that we've seen it. Bayern against Barcelona. We have seen Champions League results this year that have been extraordinary. And I think some of that is down to COVID, right? But I don't necessarily buy into that. And it's not a problem of talent. It's a problem of how the talent is being used in defense. Defensive issues are there, but it's because when you look at the way Germany pressed the Spanish side, the message or the game plan that Löw had obviously didn't work, right? So then you're back to the coach. You say, okay, well, these players didn't perform the way they did, right? But they perform the way they're supposed to when they play for their club sides. Matthias Ginter has been excellent for Gladbach, a Gladbach side that is currently, I believe, they're first in the Champions League group, in a very difficult Champions League group, with Real Madrid, Shakhtar Donetsk, and Inter Milan. So it's obviously working there, right? So I just don't buy into it. And if you then have faced with the fact that the talent is there, but the decision making on the field isn't, then it becomes a calibration issue, and the calibration is due to the coach.
Going forward, Löw has been with the team for, I believe, 14 years now as the head coach alone. I think that he was the assistant to Klinsmann before that, wasn't he? Yeah.
So he's been with this bunch for 16 years.
Yeah, that's an extremely long time. And I feel like football has sort of evolved in a way that these extremely long tenures don't necessarily work out as they used to with guys like Ferguson and Arsene Wenger and stuff like that. So can it be simply broken down to that it's just gone a bit stale for Germany and Löw?
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. It's gone stale. And sometimes change is good. And I think that the DFB has to be faulted for not bringing up on this change of planning ahead, to think that, well, maybe we have to have a succession plan. And I think change is sometimes all you need. I personally think that the change needs to happen now. Listen, this will sound really harsh, but if you have just guided Germany to a historic defeat like that, saying at the press conference, the only thing that should really have come out of Joachim Low's and Oliver Bierhoff's mouths yesterday was that they take full responsibility and that it's time to step down. They should have stepped down yesterday. It was embarrassing. It was absolutely absolutely embarrassing. And I think it was the perfect time to maybe say, okay, clear house. And maybe it's still coming, I mean, it's now 24 hours after the defeat. The direction seems like that they haven't really come to the conclusion that the change is needed. But I personally think that is the only thing they should have taken responsibility and stepped down. And they didn't. But sometimes it's, sometimes then the DFB has to then come in and say, as a federation, you guys had a good run. It's time to hand this over to someone else. And I think that's what should have happened probably today.
And if they were to hand it over for someone else, if Manuel could have his way, who would you like to see leading this German side? Would it be a well-known manager? Would it be someone who's maybe on the up in Germany?
Ralf Rangnick. He's available right now. I mean, after 2018, he wasn't because he's working in the RB Leipzig setup, but he's free and he's excellent. He is kind of the mastermind behind anything that Germany has done over the last 20 years anyways, right? But sometimes it's not about that we need to change our philosophy drastically as a German national team, but we might have to just change the face. The players might just need a different voice telling them the same story. And he would be excellent to do that. It wouldn't be a dramatic revolution in a sense, because it's basically the person that has reinvented the German game anyways, but is also a person that has shown that he can work with young players. When he did step in as a head coach for Leipzig in that transition year, Leipzig did very well in the Bundesliga, right? He did promote Leipzig too. He doesn't want to do full-time coaching anymore per se. I think he'd be perfect. I think that's who they should approach, and then hand it over to, give him a couple of years to kind of steady the ship, and then hand it over to someone like Jürgen Klopp or Thomas Tuchel, or, someone who has had enough of maybe club coaching, right? But right now, he's available right now. And if I had been the DFB, if I was the president of the DFB, I would have first given Ollie and Yogi a call yesterday and said, this is it, guys. We have to go in a different direction. And then I would have phoned Ralf and said, I don't care what you asked for. Here's the check. Get it done. Fix the side. Because I think he would.
Yeah, he's certainly one of those coaches that's sort of floating around right now, that it's a bit puzzling as to how nobody has done exactly what you said and said, here's the check, fix my team, like him or Pochettino or whoever it may be. But I think that will be it. I just want to say thank you, first of all, for taking so much time to do this. This was really, really fun. I really enjoyed that.
And I hope that you enjoyed it as well. And if you did, be sure to drop a like to feed that hungry YouTube algorithm for me so it pushes this video in front of other football fans. Check out Manuel's work, linked below, as said before. Subscribe if you're new, but other than that, thank you for taking the time. My name's Adrian. I love you, and I'll catch you in the next video. Ciao.